The Undertaker responds to calling today's wrestlers soft. This is from right up from Inside the Ropes. Despite the fact that many now see the WWE Hall of Famer as another disgruntled veteran who is not happy with how the business has evolved, The Undertaker gave his side of the story. That's the big thing, this is the quote from Mr. Taker. Especially with the wrestling people and wrestling fans, everything feels like if I criticise you about something publicly, it's a personal attack. That's how people see it. But really, it's not a personal attack. I'm giving my opinion on how I would have done it or what worked for me. That doesn't make it the right way, it's just right for me. Now, one of The Undertaker's comments that drew the most backlash and ridicule came about when he appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast. This is old, but he must have made these comments recently, and stated that the stars of today are more obsessed with video games, adding that they were soft, and back in his day the wrestlers carried around guns and knives to handle their business. Admitting that soft was not the right term, The Undertaker did take issue to the passive-aggressive replies on social media, adding that the stars of today should have bigger priorities. Here's another quote. In wrestling and maybe in general, if you criticise something or say something, people take it personally. Imagine that. Maybe soft wasn't the right choice of words. I was just starting to talk and came out of my shell then. I didn't realise how far Joe Rogan's podcast would reach and who would be watching. What killed me, though, was the passive-aggressive tweets from other wrestlers. I was like, oh, God, you've got to be kidding me. You know you need to get off Twitter and focus on why they're not drawing instead. So there you go. But there I go again. I can't help myself. I love you guys when I offer critiques. People think I'm attacking them personally. It's just my opinion. It's for okay, right? There's two things.
Isn't Undertaker saying the same thing we're saying? Said the same thing.
What are we saying?
Oh, it's not the wrestling, and it's this. You got to tell the story, and and what he's saying, he's comparing wrestlers today, the people getting in today, are more interested in other things. They're interested in social media more than they are trying to convey a character on TV. But he said the same thing we were saying. But I wonder what Meltzer say anything about that.
There's only two people on Twitter, I refuse to call it X, Twitter, that actually have social media work for them. Maybe three. Drew McIntyre, MJF, maybe CM Punk. They all use social media properly. They use it to further interest in themselves and their on-screen characters at the same time. And pretty much nobody else does that. And it's such... If you look at social media, it's just one giant cancer for the most part, in my opinion. But the fact is that it's also an incredible tool to, for lack of a better term, get yourself over as well.
Okay, Joe Rogan has like 10 million followers, subscribers to his podcast. And he does a great show. And I'm glad he did one with Undertaker, and I haven't heard that, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to listen to that. And I'm going to see what Mr. Rogan has to say, because I think he has a great podcast. And every time he has a guest on there, they will pull the clips out, and they're doing, and you know more about this than I do. How many hits will he have at the end of a week?
Oh, I don't follow Joe Rogan
200 million.
Millions upon millions. Millions upon millions.
Yes. So.
Even more than us, Dutch.
No, it's impossible.
I know.
But here's Undertaker, and people are blasting him.
Well, exactly why. And this is people within the business, with Undertaker calling today's wrestlers on the whole too soft. And his example was they all want to sit around playing games instead of bringing guns and knives to to the locker room instead. Are wrestlers too soft these days for you?
Well, it's a different breed. Things are going to change. And I don't think they can take criticism like the guys in my day did. Hell, that's all we got anyway, was criticism. Nobody said, "Oh, you're no good bastard." This, you were supposed to do that. You're supposed to make people dislike you. But when you get them to dislike you on social media, that's different. Because unless you're getting paid for the clicks, you're not getting paid off ticket sales, pay-per-view sales, or gimmick sales, or anything else. You're getting just paid off the clicks. Yeah, I think it's just a different breed. I don't know if they're too soft, but And I think maybe if Mark had taken a little more time, he could explain himself. But yeah, soft is I think is a good term for it. I wouldn't disagree with the term.
On the Stevie Richards show, cheap plug, that I also host and YouTube and blah blah blah. It's doing very well, by the way, Dutch. Before you ask, it's doing great. In fact, it's doing really well. We talked about locker room etiquette back in the day, and some of it I was listening to was just like, I could never put up with that in a million years. And Stevie gave an example. He gave a lot of examples, but one he told me was that Dean Malenko, in the early days in ECW, I think, literally kicked him out of a chair so that he could sit on it. And there were plenty of other chairs available. But apparently back in the day, if a veteran walked in, you gave him the chair, even if you were in like an empty church of like 200 cover of pews. Like, was that how it always was back in the day? You always let a veteran have your chair, even if there was plenty of others?
Well, if you were respectful, you would. And I don't think Dean, not Dean, but
Stevie.
who's the guy you're talking?
Stevie.
Oh, I'm blasted today.
First show back, baby.
I don't think Stevie was intending to be disrespectful. Yeah, that could happen. He kicked the chair out and let me have the chair, kid. And it was just one of the things done. And I'm sure Stevie got up there and laughed it off because Dean was a veteran, Stevie wasn't. So it's a different level meeting up. And nobody said anything to Dean about it. He just did it. So now, if he'd have come in and kicked the veteran out of the chair, that'd been different. That would have been a fight. That would have been a show of disrespect, and you'd have had a fight because guys used to. I've seen a lot of fights in the dressing room, but I didn't grow up with that. I didn't come up with that. Most guys were respectful to each other. I know I always was, but I was always respectful to the younger guys too. I heard a booker one time, he just cussed his kid out one time. And there was Bill Dundee. He cussed Jimmy Cornette out like a dog because Jimmy was just starting and didn't know. And when he got to the back, Bill just lit into him. Blah, 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 you stupid mother effer, you know. And I told Bill later, I said, Bill, what was the purpose of that? Well, he needs to learn, motherfucker. I said, Bill, he didn't do it on purpose. He did it because he didn't know any better. So now you got to tell him what he did wrong. And instead of embarrassing him in front of the whole dressing room, you need to call him aside and tell him what he did wrong. But what he did was he embarrassed Jimmy, and I felt sorry for Jimmy. And Jimmy had only been in the business like 3 weeks or 2 weeks, or maybe no more than a month. But you got to tell people, if you're in a position as a booker, you have to tell them what they did wrong in terms that doesn't embarrass them in front of other people, and so they'll understand it. And Bill, but to Bill's defense, he may have been having a bad day. He may have had something else happen. I don't know. But I found that I didn't like it, and I said something about it. If it had been me, I said, Jimmy, come here, blah, 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 blah. Don't do this, don't do that. And I think you'll find it works a lot better. And I think he would have taken notice of that more than the big ass cussing he took.
An ass cussing?
Yes.
Good man. Okay, there's got to be like some sort of happy medium there, because the reason I brought up the Dean Malenko example was just because there's just that's unnecessary. And it just doesn't do anything for anybody. And then, as you say, Bill Dundee, just reaming out Jim Cornette was not the right way to go. We can all agree. It's not constructive, and it just makes people feel bad, and the message gets lost. But is there some sort of balance where what's missing from a wrestling locker room now that you wish was still there back in your day? Playing cards?
Oh, playing cards, and they banned that too.
Who did?
Because, well, a lot of promoters banned it. You couldn't. But you know what would happen? They'd start playing cards, and I forgot what they play. Crazy, I forgot what the game.
It was usually crib, wasn't it, with the board and the pegs?
No, not cribbage. That. It was I can't think of it right now. But a lot of guys would miss their entrance because they were about ready to win this game. And one more card. Get in the goddamn ring, you idiot. Oh, God. And he'd throw his cards down. Or sometimes if he was going to lose, he just turned the whole board over. And it would all, and the Bill Watts stopped it. I think Jerry Jarrett stopped it at one time. You couldn't play cards in Mid Atlantic when I was there. They just banned it because the guy's missing the cues and everything else.
So what would you bring back then? So if locker rooms these days or wrestlers are too soft these days, what would you bring back from the old school to toughen them up a bit?
Well, like I said, it's a different era, and I don't know if you can bring it back. It is what it is, and however you go into a dressing room, whatever the vibe is in that dressing room, that's what you got to go by. And I don't know what I would bring back, but I don't see anything really. It doesn't bother me if a guy's soft anyway. If he wants to play a game, that's his business. I stay out of his business and want him to stay out of mine. So most of the dressing rooms, I think, and WWE, they want you to work on your matches, and I think the guys do that, especially in WWE. Those are highly, highly choreographed matches, and you don't just sit down and we'll call it in the ring. No, they got to work all this stuff out, and it takes them basically. They work out the routine, and it takes them basically maybe a couple hours to get to the point. Then they go to the ring, work it out, and then they're talking it over, even going to the ring. So I think they have the intensity in the matches, and I think that's what's missing. Because a lot of guys just go out there back in the day, they would just whatever happens, happens. But we didn't have TV like WWE. You can't do that now because now you got a worldwide audience watching you, and they want it to be good. They want it to be crisp, want it to be smooth. And I think that's maybe one of the things that was missing back in the day. I wouldn't bring that back. I think it's actually improved a little bit.